Hi, I'm Jeff Provine. Welcome to Guthrie, Oklahoma. I'm here with Uncovering Oklahoma to take a look at our first capital. So when the land grant happened in 1889, everybody flocked to Guthrie because it was going to be our capital and our economic hub, they felt. However, Oklahoma City outpaced it, and when it, as the Guthrians say, stole the capital, Guthrie kind of died down a little bit, went into a little bit of hibernation. And this actually turned into be a blessing in disguise. When the 1970s, people got more interested in our history, and suddenly we had this pristine Victorian-era downtown right in the middle of the prairie. Now Guthrie serves as a huge tourist draw. People pack in from all over the state and the country to come and see what remains of the past. And among these people, we also have a lot of the remnants of the past. They say that Guthrie is the most per capita case of ghosts anywhere in the state. Here we are in front of the old Lintz Department Store, which the easternmost portion is today still continuing on that tradition at the Extra Special Fabric Company. And in there, they still have one of the workers, they say, from the old Lintz Department Store. This is a lady they call Elsie. She's said to be wearing a taffeta dress, and she was first heard walking around with that whoosh, whoosh sound that's familiar of the old style dresses. And they say that she was a seamstress back in the day and is continuing on as the seamstressing continues here in the shop. And every once in a while, people say they will see her typically sitting in her favorite pink chair or even walking around. And the owner here, Miss Kilborn, was telling us a story about just 3 months ago. Folks were sitting in the back working away, and one of the ladies looked up and said, "Elsie's here." And her daughter scoffed and said, no, there's no such thing as ghosts. And to prove that she was there, Elsie pushed her hard enough that she almost fell over. So I guess belief in ghosts, one way or the other, you'll find it out. All right, here we are outside of the Blue Belle Saloon, which was one of many, many places to come get a drink here in Guthrie. Town had kind of a rough history with all the money pouring in. There were a lot of folks who would be willing to separate you from your money. And here at the saloons, you could be distinguished enough that you'd come in with your family to the upper floor. And when your family's finished eating, you'd leave them up there or send them off. And you, as the gentleman, could go downstairs to the other saloon, where things were a little bit rowdier. If you wanted to get really rowdy, you could go through the door out the back up to Miss Lizzie's, the most famous brothel here in Guthrie. A couple of interesting stories about this. Most famously, of course, was that famed cowboy actor Tom Mix came here and bartended for a couple of years before moving on and then eventually starring in silent films, wrestling steers. The ghosts, however, seem to still linger around, and from time to time, people claim to see a man dressed in Western clothes, wearing a black hat, walk in and up to the bar. And even spookier, down in the basement, they say you can still catch some EVPs of girls' voices, which are said to be some of those Miss Lizzie's girls. I guess still slaving away at the work that they didn't necessarily want to do. It wouldn't be a day in Guthrie without talking a little bit about the tunnels said to run beneath the town. And there's a lot of contention back and forth. Some folks say, oh, the tunnels are just a myth. Other folks say, well, no, it's true, my grandma told me about them. And some folks say they themselves have been down there. The maximum size of the legend says that the tunnels ran at the least from all the way to Jelsma Stadium and the Masonic Lodge out to the train station in the creek, and then blocks on either side. And some folks said that it was a system of actual planned tunnels. Other people said, no, it's just a connection of different basements around. So a lot of myth and legend about what exactly there might be. For the folks who said there were none, there have been several discovered, typically directly along the buildings. Like here, we have this cutaway of the street, which originally, when people were working on the streets back in the 1960s and 70s, they were surprised to find a whole nother alleyway built beneath. Now they've opened them up, and you have some access to go inside. And there are other cases. Oklahoman reported in the 1960s as some city workers were going through renovating one of the buildings, they opened up a sub-basement that nobody had known about. And inside was a pristine, although a little dusty, collection of 1930s gambling paraphernalia with slot machines and roulette wheels, and they didn't know what to do with it. So they decided, well, we'll just seal it back up and worry about that later. So there's definitely something going on underneath the streets here in Guthrie, but nobody quite knows what. The old train station in Guthrie is fraught with its own ghost stories. It's packed with history, too. Here was one of the original Harvey houses. So back in the early days of this idea of intercontinental travel, people wanted to know where to eat. And Fred Harvey had this idea of, well, why don't we put the same restaurant in a lot of different places? It was the first chain. So people could hop on and off the train while it was refueled with coal or later diesel and get a quick bite to eat that they knew would be good. To staff these, they had what they called Harvey girls, and these were unmarried gals who were hired from all over the country based on their looks and their politeness, we'll say, as well as their ability to serve very, very quickly with a smile. And here in Guthrie, we have one of our Harvey girls still hanging around. They say that her name is Evelyn, and during the First World War, she had a boyfriend that was writing letters as he was there on the front in France. And then suddenly his letter stopped, and she wrote back, but nobody answered. And she didn't know what had happened to him. Was he dead? Had he found somebody else? What was going on? And she became so despondent that she no longer came into work. She spent her days watching the rails, trying to keep an eye out for the mail train to come through and drop off with a potential another letter. And eventually got to the point where she was staying up all hours of the night, watching for the next morning's train with the mail. And as she was walking up and down these tracks, walking very closely to them, they say that a train finally clipped her and got her. And then just a few weeks after that, her fiancé, or future fiancé, arrived here in town trying to hunt her down because she'd stopped sending him letters after he ended up in the hospital. And it turned out it was just a big misunderstanding. And unfortunately, he found out that thus her life had ended instead of his. And so he went away brokenhearted, but Evelyn said is still to be here, walking up and down the tracks. And time again, there have been conductors saying that they saw somebody in a yellow dress walking on the tracks, and they blew the horn trying to get her out of the way, but she wouldn't move, and assumed they hit her, and then finally would stop the train and back up, run those miles back, and trying to find out, hey, who did I hit? And there's no body. All right, thanks everybody for joining us on just a few of the ghost stories of this very historical and very strange town. If you'd like to learn more, definitely check out Guthrie. Come up here yourself and come on the Guthrie Ghost Walk, which is a historical explanation of a lot of the tales. You can also go on the Oklahoma Paranormal Association's investigation tours, where you go into the buildings with some of the equipment to find your own EVPs or EMF disturbances. For some of my stories, check out Haunted Guthrie, which I co-wrote with OPA co-founder Tanya McCoy. So, thanks once again, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share. So today, consistent. Let's try that again. So Miss Lizzie's was with the premier bordello, we'll say, here in town. Which the premier doesn't. There's tons of them. Apparently, that whole side of town used to be the red light district. All those state legislators coming in, good business. So not like today at all. No, we probably shouldn't be getting that on film.